Well, welcome to Riding Mower King. In this video today, we're going to see if we can get this Craftsman LT1000 working, because I have somebody that's looking for a mower, and I think this is going to be a good fit for them. It's only a 38-inch deck, but I think I'm going to be able to put a bagger on this because they like to have a bagger. And I got this from the original owner, who said they just decided it was time to upgrade. And usually, there's a little bit more to it than that. So we got to figure out, why did they really stop using this? And I tried turning it over by hand, and it turned really hard, like the compression release is bad. And I looked in the carburetor, and the air filter housing is wet. There's gas in there. And I looked at the cap, and the vent on the cap seems to be clogged with dirt. Right here, the little vent hole, that's brown. And it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to overcome the float and let fuel go through the carburetor into the cylinder. And I think that's where we're at right now. So I'm going to take out the spark plug, turn it over by hand a little bit, and see if any fuel comes out of there. And then we'll get to where we put the battery in and see how this thing runs. I checked the oil. There was no gas in the oil that I could see, and the gas tank's not empty yet. So that's really why I think it's just the vent cap that's being a problem. So yeah, the spark plug is wet. Already a couple drops of something falling out of there. So this looks to be a newer style. It's a Champion 71 Eco. It's got a whole different kind of porcelain there on it. So they kind of maintained it a little bit, I guess, but they must have got tired of it being hard to start. So there you can see we got plenty of gas out of it, or at least it's probably gas. So we're going to have to dry that up before we try to start it. But at least now it turns over easier. So we got the gas dried up some. So we will put a battery in now. So we'll put the brake on. And the throttle's working. I'm going to leave the choke off just because there's gas in the carburetor already. And we'll crank it without the spark plug once. And we got plenty more gas that came out there because it went a lot faster. You may be noticing that there's some oil there, and I think most of that is really coming from the dipstick seal right there, and possibly from this fancy oil drain that a lot of people don't like. I do have more dipstick seals. I'll be replacing that. And I did do a video on just that a couple months ago. Maybe I can put a link at the bottom. Well, let's crank it and see what happens. Well, we need a bushing up here at the top. Now, you may have noticed there, it was a little jerky when I tried to go forward and back. And usually that's because the drive belt is worn out and stretched. And the pedal was grabbing all the way at the top. So there's a good chance we're going to be putting the drive belt on this. But the deck seems to work pretty good. The transmission worked, obviously. The brakes need a little bit of adjustment because I pushed the pedal down. I almost ran into the pressure washer there. So we're going to have to adjust the brakes. We're going to check the belt, probably replace it. And we're going to check the blades and probably sharpen them. And we're going to change the dipstick seal, probably change the oil. The air filter looked all right already. I looked at that. And we're going to work on the gas cap vent and put a fuel filter, a fuel shutoff in the gas line. You know, some of you guys might think, okay, well, it's done already. It's running. Because I've gotten comments on my other one. Oh, I just put a battery in it and the starter and it's ready to sell. Well, I don't really sell them that way. But this will be ready pretty quick, depending on how long it takes to get a belt. And, you know, what I got to do with the blades for the deck. But otherwise, it's actually not in bad shape. It's really dirty. I got to get a pressure washer working here. But overall, this is actually a decent little tractor. It's a super base model. You know, it is a 16 horsepower, one of the last pre-Intech engines probably. You know, this still says IC on it before they went to the Intech. You know, it's been sitting for a while, or wherever it was sitting in the garage was damp maybe. But overall, the tractor is really not bad. It's not pretty, but it'll look better after I pressure wash it. And it's gear drive, so you don't have to worry about the transmission being bad when it warms up. So we're going to do a little bit more to this. We're going to check the blades on it. I'll see if I have a belt. I probably don't, so I'll have to order one of those. So let's look at the gas cap here. So on the gas cap, this vent in the center is full of dirt. And it doesn't take much for a little pressure to build up in that tank and force the fuel past the needle valve. You know, this is actually a pretty common problem. But we're going to put a fuel shutoff valve on it. But we are going to put that in there. We're going to change the fuel filter. Surprisingly, it actually runs pretty good once it gets done making noise and decides to start. So we're getting ready to replace the drive belt on this tractor. And I already removed the deck. And it's a lot easier to get to the upper belt if you take that deck out of the way. And also with the deck off, then we're going to be able to take the blades off that deck. And I peeked underneath. It needs new blades. So I'm pretty sure I have blades for that. Luckily, I have a belt for this, so I didn't have to order one. I didn't have to go out and get one. And also you want to remove the battery, because right down there is the pulley where you got to take the belt off of. All we got to do is get that box out of there. We're going to get this box out of the way. And this is a little bit older one, so it's got a tab on either side. And then we can just slide it up out of the way here. Now this one happens to have this bracket to help hold the belt on, because this belt gets slack in it when you push down on the pedal. Sometimes they have a bracket on either side to help hold the belt in that pulley. So, you know, it might look a little bit different back here depending on your tractor. Okay, now we got the back of the belt off. So now we're going to work on the underneath of the tractor. And lucky for me, I have an engine hoist to lift it up nice and high. So we're going to get under there and we're going to lower that pulley there. And then we're going to take off, we're going to loosen one of those pulleys back there. We may be able to get that belt off that pulley without moving this down at all. But normally you would take this bolt out so you can move this pulley down. But the brackets on this tractor is a wire bracket. Sometimes they have metal guides that are real close to the pulley. But this one here looks like it may be a little bit easier. Well, we are going to have to loosen this. So that's enough to move this bracket out of the way so we can get this belt off this pulley. And then on the back one, it just comes right off. So on this one here, it comes right off around that bracket. So I didn't actually have to do anything with that pulley there. And then we have a guide here on the left side of the tractor. This one here, the belt just lays in there. So now we got this belt off. And this belt is labeled as a 1/2 inch by 95 for this tractor. So that's what size belt this actually takes. I'm not going to get into the part number because you have to look up your machine because they're not all the same. So you have to look up your model number that's under the seat to determine what your belt size is. So this here's the belt that was on it. And I can tell this belt feels a little thin. And here's the brand new belt. It's an older belt, but it's brand new. What really happens with these, the belts don't necessarily stretch, but they wear, they get thinner and thinner. And the thinner they get, the more in the pulley they go deeper into the groove. So they're effectively looser. But here you can see there's a difference in how wide the belt is here versus the new one. And then on the inside, the belt, the thickness here, the height is a little bit different. So this belt definitely has a lot of wear on it. But on these kind of transmissions, these belts last a very long time. But that one, like I said, I let the pedal out and it was real grabby. So hopefully with this new one, it should feel kind of normal where it'll grab a little more gradual and won't jerk you back in the seat. So on this tractor, this should go on fairly easy. You want to make sure that the belt's not twisted. That when you put it on from front to back, that there's no twist in it. Otherwise, that'll make it wear out a lot faster. So we're going to put it back around these pulleys just the way it was. And even this front guide here, the new belt, it just goes right in. It's so nice. And when you get to these pulleys here and you're trying to figure out which way it goes, the skinny part of the V goes into the pulley and the flat side of the belt goes against the flat side of the pulley. So that's going to go just like that. And then back here, it needs to go up inside that guide, just like that. And now the back part, we're going to make sure it doesn't get wrinkled. And we're going to tuck it underneath that metal guide there. And we'll get it down in the groove on that side. And we'll get it in the groove on this side. Maybe. Okay, so now the belt is routed where it needs to go. So we have to tighten up this bolt here for this guide. This has to be here to keep that belt against that pulley so it doesn't fall off. And it actually has a carriage bolt up top. And you want to make it so this is just about where it was, so that when this pulley moves, it's not going to, this guide is not going to rub the belt. And right now I have the brake on so that this belt is going to be loose, just like it would be if you had the park brake on with the belt disengaged. That's going to make it a lot easier to get it on the pulleys because it's not going to want to be tight. And also when you're under here, now's a good time to make sure that these pulleys turn. I've seen a lot of the newer Craftsmans where one of these pulleys goes bad, the bearing goes bad, the pulley stops turning and the belt starts wearing into the pulley. So even if you're not changing the belt, you want to reach under here and make sure that these things turn and even give it a look if you can to make sure that these pulleys are not damaged, because they will eventually eat up a belt. The belt will be loose. You'll put a new belt on, and if you don't see it, it'll just eat up a new belt. So now we're going to go to the back, and we're going to put the belt around the pulley in the back. So now I have the belt around this guide. I just need to get it on the rest of the pulley, and that should not be that hard to do. Yep, just little by little, working around that pulley. Now, if we let the brake off that pulley, that belt should get nice and snug. Just like that. So we're going to put the battery back in and fire this thing up real quick and see what happens. So we're going to see how this does starting up after sitting overnight. And once it's started, we'll see how that belt works. Then I have to adjust the brake yet. Well, the clutch pedal part definitely works a little smoother now. Not as grabby. Now, when I started it, it did seem like that carburetor leaked a little bit more gas through the needle valve. So we may be taking that carburetor off and looking at it, in addition to adding a fuel shutoff. So you can see there, it needs to be cleaned, and it needs new blades really bad. And there's two. So these are the typical AYP Craftsman Husqvarna 5-star blades. So let's go see if we can find a good match. So here we got some new blades, and you want to make sure that the length is the same, which it is. So these blades are like new old stock. Is this old enough to say that? It's a pretty old tractor. So these blades are basically brand new. They've just been never used. And you may not be able to see it, but it looks like the factory sharpening on there, the way that there's some grooves in there. Now, yeah, they're rusty, but the grass is going to buff that rust right off of there. Now we'll work on getting some of this grass out of here. So when you put these blades on, you want the wings facing the deck. This part down here should be flat. But when you get out to the end of the, this part here is flat. When you get out to the end, it should match that. No matter what kind of blade you have, a mulching blade or just a cutting blade, it should be flat across here. That's how you know this is the cutting side. The wings face the deck. Now we just got to make sure that it goes on here so it's lined up. And the same thing with this blade. And on these, it don't matter which way they're facing. They're going to pass each other. These are not interference decks. So now we know that those star teeth are engaged. So we can run this in and tighten it up. This is one of the benefits of doing the blades with the deck off. You can see that the blades are engaged, as opposed to holding it up there and tightening up the screw, and then you run the screw up, and sometimes, a lot of times, those teeth are not engaged, and you mess up the spindle, you mess up the blade. So now we know those are on right. So even if you put them straight across, they're not going to hit. But these blades are offset, because straight is this way. So when they're traveling, the grass is going through like that. So they do have overlap, because they're not exactly side by side when they're under the mower. So now we'll get the deck out of the way. We'll clean up some of that grass and hang the deck back on the tractor. Now we have to put everything on that we took off on the way out. So we have this cable here. This cable goes on the tensioner with a washer on the bottom and then a washer on top of this spring. So the spring sits on there like that. You have your washer. Then the clip goes back in. Then back here, it goes through this housing here. And then it pops in there. Then you have this little grommet that's supposed to go over it. Then you have this clip here. It's going to go over just like that. Well, actually, there's a little hole right here, and we're going to put it through that little hole. So now your cable's on. So now we can slide this under here. Yeah, we'll put the handle up. Now you get it pretty centered, and we'll drop the arms down in the center here so we can hook up the lift. Now it gets a little bit tricky. We have to lift the deck up a little bit. Now we want to get the belt up over the guides here, and back on that pulley. I got it on this side. We'll finish it on the other side. So we'll pull this belt around the front of the pulley here. There we go. Now the deck belt is back on. Make sure it's around all the pulleys on the deck, that it didn't fall off. Now we'll lift it up. And we'll put this guide here on. The lifting arm here. So now on the back here, you have what I call a lateral one, goes side to side. On these older models, they had one to keep the deck from moving side to side. Now we're left with the two big ones and the front bar. We'll give it a little lift, see if that'll back it up. There we go. Now it goes right in. There we are. So now we'll try it out again, now that I can actually move it. So, of course, since we're here in Pennsylvania, we're getting ready for another storm to come through this afternoon. But luckily, I was able to get the drive belt on. I got new blades on the deck. So we still got to do a little work on the carburetor probably. And the oil dipstick seal. Got a new one on there. So there you can see with that new belt, it's a lot easier to get smooth operation when you let the clutch out, when you let the pedal out. It's a lot easier to make it so it doesn't jerk you back in the seat. So that'll wrap it up for today. And we'll come back. We'll be checking out the carburetor and the dipstick seal. And then we'll throw a bagger on this. Figure out how to give it a bath. I got to get a pressure washer working yet this year. I didn't do that yet. So that's where we're at for now. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this carburetor. So I think the needle valve's leaking a little bit. We're going to try and make that stop. First, we're going to put a fuel shutoff valve on here. right about here. And you got to figure out there's an arrow on these things to tell you which way the flow is supposed to go. I don't know how much it matters, but there's an arrow, so we're going to put it on like that. So we need to put a clamp on here so the fuel don't run out. I like using this style. Yeah, you can put vice grips on it, but I like this. All right, there's one. And there's the other. Now we've got our arrow facing the right way. And that's all there is to putting a fuel shutoff valve in line. But the factory don't do that. They would rather that you have problems, and if you have enough problems and don't realize it, like over the winter, you end up buying another tractor because it's going to smoke real bad, and people are going to think they blew the engine. And everybody but that customer benefits. So we'll get this fuel filter off of here. Yeah, I didn't really see any dirt come out of there. Doesn't mean there's not some in there though. So now we're going to take this whole cover off. And I did not see anywhere where this here is connected to that. Sometimes they'll have a little screw under here. But this is an old style. This is not an Intech. So I just did not see any. We'll see when we try and lift it off here. And I do have the air filter out of it already. We'll probably end up just putting a new air filter in. Now I'm just going to take it off right here, just to make it a little bit quicker. So these two screws are 3/8 heads also, just like those were. So now we have our regular linkage here. We got the choke in the back. It just slides out of that slot, and now it's out of the way. Then we got the little spring over here. We'll pull that up and out. And we tilt the carburetor, and the throttle linkage comes right out. Now we'll take you can take that wire off first if you really want. But this thing is full. And that's the problem. That it's letting gas run down in there. Letting gas run down into the cylinder. So we need to take this bowl off. I have to take this off. I got my special wrench for that. I think I'll spray this carburetor a little bit to keep the dirt out of it. Okay, so we got this cleaned off a little bit, enough to take it apart. You need a really thin 1/2-inch wrench for this. Preferably you get it at the right angle where it's easy to turn. And this here doesn't like carburetor cleaner. It's starting to swell up a little bit. We can deal with that later. Well, that used to be a gasket there. Not a big deal. Not for me anyway. I'm sure I have another one on another carburetor. Well, the inside of the carburetor looks pretty good. Even in the bowl here, there's one little piece of dirt in there that could have fell in when I took it apart. We'll take the float out and see what that looks like. It would be nice if you could do this without taking the carburetor off. Well, you could get it apart, but you won't be easy to get back together. I don't really see anything in there, but we'll spray it. Put our finger over that so it don't come out. Now I'm going to spray in here the way the fuel flows. In case there is a little piece of something in there, it can come out. So that would have flushed it out right there. Alright, so we're going to reassemble this part. Well, maybe I'll clean up where the seal goes first. We'll scrape that off a little bit around here where the O-ring seal is going to be. We'll scrape the dirt off of this. Then we'll give it a spray. Then we'll put the float back in. Then we'll go get a new seal. Now you have to drop this down in there so that the needle goes back down in that hole. I hope that was on camera. I hope you could see that. Then we'll get the pin, slide the pin back in. When you get the pin started, you gotta push this down a little bit so that it lines up. Just like that. Then you can check your float height, which the float should be level. Darn bugs. And the float looks pretty good. There's no spring on this one. That's not spring loaded or anything like that. But you need to make sure that it's level, that the float, you can't have the float hit anything up there inside the carburetor. The float needs to push up against the needle valve to turn the gas off. But that float height there looks good. Now we'll get this old seal out of here. Boy, this thing is hard and stuck in there. So I'm going to scrape this a little bit. Then I'm going to get a wire brush and clean all this dirt out of here. So with this being in here for a very long time, what I think anyway, and I took it apart and that carburetor's spotless inside. The person that had this before took care of their gas. You know, I didn't play 20 questions with them, but it doesn't seem like they put bad gas in it or left it go bad in the carburetor. You know, even if this is a replacement carburetor, it's been a long time since this bowl was off of here. They were doing something right. Okay, so we got our gasket here, our seal. It's actually not a new one. Somehow I don't have any of these. But it's a lot better than what there was. So we just get it fitted on here. The ones I actually keep are a little bit bigger than this. Diameter wise it would work, but they're too thick. The bowl would be up too high, it would just not work. And then we got our seal on there. We're actually going to use this one. This one's got a better gasket. So one of the things you want to watch is that the threads inside are just about against here, because when you put this solenoid on, it's going to tighten up. It's going to press the bowl against those threads, and that's going to make it get tight against the seal up here. And the seal that I was going to put in is too thick. So yeah, it would definitely get tight against here, but it would end up bending the bowl, and it probably would not seal and cause other problems like a leak. So you don't want to try and just get by putting a thicker gasket in there. This is what I thought it was going to be. but it's not. Okay. So it's all ready to go back on. The pressure washer will clean up the rest. And I'm going to leave this end off. I'm going to hook up the gas and everything just to see if anything drips out. So first we'll put the throttle linkage on, because that's the hardest one. I'm going to use the pliers. So I'm going to hold that over. That way the hole doesn't go underneath the linkage here. And we'll grab that like that. And let that drop in there. So you want to be careful with that little spring that you don't bend it up, because it's kind of calibrated for a certain temperature or for a certain tension. And if you change that tension, it's really just not going to work right the way it's supposed to. Now we'll get our choke rod here. Slide that in. And we'll hook up our solenoid down here so we don't forget. That one's a little hard to forget just because it's out in the open. And we'll get our filter here. Now these don't have an arrow, but I'm going to put it with the bigger side on the inlet, because that should have more capacity to hold dirt. I know if it's wrong, somebody's going to leave a comment. And that's the whole purpose of comments. If you see something that doesn't make sense or it's just wrong, you leave a comment. A nice comment would be nice. It doesn't have to be mean. But that's what they're for. And so now I'm going to open the fuel. And this is tilted downward, which is perfect. That way if the bowl overfills, it's going to run out there. So down here is where we want to focus and see if anything runs out there. So we'll move this one in nice and close. So we'll see if that drips. Meanwhile, I'm going to go blow off the top cover where the air filter goes, and I'll grab a new air filter, and we'll see what happens with that. Well, nothing yet. Well, I am going to take this other screw out of the back over here. It don't want to turn. So we can put in this dipstick tube seal. Put that up there. Alright, so here's this Craftsman we were working on. I had to get it all back together. Customer needs it. So it's going to go out like this. It's not going to get a bath. A couple other little odds and ends. The customer's going to take care of that. Just because they need it, you know, they need it right away. I don't like sending them out like this, but, you know, no big deal. It's ready to cut. It'll cut fine just the way it is. And, you know, we added the bagger. That was part of the deal on this. So we'll catch you in the next video.